Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we'll be talking about Shang-Chi, which is expected to come out this week to possibly the lowest ever opening weekend for any Marvel Cinematic Universe film of all time, including losing to films like The Hulk, or The Incredible Hulk, rather, which up to this point has been the lowest grossing Marvel film of all time. We'll talk a little bit about where these numbers are coming from. I've actually already mentioned many of these numbers before on Box Office Pro, but our good friend John F. Trent over at Bounding to Comics does some really great research to show that using pandemic as an excuse really doesn't hold much water when you compare it to other things going on in the entertainment industry. Before going any further, please make sure they smash that like button, light up that fire button. If you're watching over on Odyssey, also make sure you're subscribed to the channel with that bell notification turned on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. So again, shout out to John F. Trent for doing the legwork here. So obviously using some of the numbers that I've already covered, that is covered over on Box Office Pro, this film is expected to have the worst opening weekend. And again, these were based on the numbers that were put out a couple weeks ago. So obviously, they could be trending a little bit differently. We'll have an updated number set coming up over the next couple of days as to far what the actual final predictions for this weekend are going to be. And we get that because we get more information about pre-sales and buzz in general, things like that. And so we'll, of course, end up seeing exactly where this film falls in line with all of it. But remember, this film, as of this point, has no China release and also is not expected to make massive amounts of money in any of the countries that it's opening up in. And the biggest reason, the biggest excuse that's been given for this failure, or at least this potential failure, has been because of COVID, because of the Delta variant. The issue, though, is that when you look at ticket sales in other industries, you really start to see that the narrative doesn't hold up all that well. And I think that John F. Trent does a great job covering that bit of news here. So let's go ahead and dive into it. It says Marvel Studios in Disney's upcoming Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings starring Simu Liu and Awkwafina is expected to have the worst opening weekend for the MCU. Box office tracking website Box Office Pro, again that's the site that I use, predicted earlier this month that Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is only expected to have an opening weekend between $35 and $55 million. If this prediction holds, Shang-Chi will have the worst opening in the MCU ever. The current holder of this title is Universal's The Incredible Hulk, starring Edward Norton and Liv Tyler, that was released back in 2008. The Incredible Hulk had an opening weekend of $55.4 million. However, if you factor in inflation, that opening weekend box office would be $70.2 million in 2021. Wow. So that alone already kind of gives you an idea of where this film is going to fall. I've already mentioned in previous, going back a couple years, you can actually check it out on my website, ombreviews.com. I actually have all of the MCU films and how much they made, how much they cost, how much net gain, net profit those films made. And the only film that has lost any money in the entire history of the MCU is The Incredible Hulk. And it looks like this is going to not only now join The Incredible Hulk, but also far surpass the financial losses of The Incredible Hulk, not only because it's expected to make less in many ways, but also because this film costs a lot more than The Incredible Hulk did when that film first came out. So again, not really looking good for Disney, not really looking good for Phase 4 of Marvel either. Obviously, there's still a lot of buzz around Spider-Man, and you might see some connections trying to push people to the theater in that way, but I just don't really see it at this point of this film being able to pull any type of financial success in any way. It goes on here to say, not only is Shang-Chi predicted to have the worst opening weekend in the MCU history, it's predicted to be the worst performing MCU at the domestic box office for its entire run in theaters. Box Office Pro predicts the film will earn between $100 and $165 million, looking at the top end. If Shang-Chi earns $165 million, the only film it would be The Incredible Hulk, which grossed $134.8 million at the domestic box office. So important thing to note there, obviously, Incredible Hulk was definitely a film that did not perform very well at the box office. This is a box office fact at this point. What is interesting, though, is that when you do these comparisons to the film that came out in 2008 to where it is today in today's dollars, you start to realize that this film, Shang-Chi, is expected to do worse in the domestic box office. So obviously, we are looking and comparing at different times in history here, but I think that John F. Trent's going to point out in a second why the whole Delta variant, excuse essentially doesn't really hold a lot of water. But as it says here, and it breaks it down, it says, if you factor in inflation, it gets handily beaten as The Incredible Hulk's gross in today's dollars is $174.9 million. So if Shang-Chi earns the top end of its projected domestic number of $165 million, it would still lose to the eventual amount that was made by the Incredible Hulk when you adjust for inflation. Now, as I said before, the one thing that could change that is if these numbers update, if the movie ends up trending to be more successful, which sometimes happens, right? We saw this happen before with films like Jungle Cruise. It was not expected to do as well, and then the final prediction came out, and it was expected to do just a little bit better. And even then, it still didn't really overperform all that much. But we do see those changes happen. And so these numbers very well could be subject to change. But it is still interesting nonetheless that at the very least, this film, even if it does adjust up to $200 million domestically, which again, I just don't see that happening when you look at other films like Black Widow and others that people actually wanted to see and actually had a history and had characters that people were excited to see. Even though they came out too late and were not in very good films, you start to realize that a film like this, which is a brand new film with really not a lot of buzz around it, is not going to be able to, even just on a practical, logical level, be able to hold and be in the same category. So it's not going to trend that high up domestically at the very least. I think we can pretty much all agree, no matter where we fall on this, at least with that point. It goes on to say, as for why Shang-Chi's opening weekend and the total gross numbers are so poor, Box Office Pro claims one of the main factors is a rise in severe virus cases and hospitalizations among the unvaccinated population. And what's interesting about this point, and the one thing I will give credit to Box Office Pro for, is that they do give pros and cons. So they give both sides as to why a film would do better than expected, and also why a film would do worse than expected. They try to the very best that they can to stay somewhat neutral on, basically the mindset behind things. However, this point being brought up as a pro needs to be unpacked a little bit more. And again, John F. Trent, thank you, good sir, for actually unpacking this for all of us. It says here, according to the University of Minnesota's Carlson School of Management of COVID-19, hospitalizations have increased in August, with the latest data from August 29th showing a total of 93,000 hospitalized due to COVID-19. The highest total of people hospitalized was on January 8th of 2021, with 128,000 people. However, and here's where it gets really good, blaming the pandemic doesn't really make sense when the CEO of Live Nation is claiming that live concert tickets are being sold out faster than ever. CEO Michael Rapino said during the company's first quarter financial call in May, fans are buying tickets and events are selling out faster than ever. He added, quote, "We're just seeing demand beyond any other historic moment." End quote. He proceeded to point out Garth Brooks, saying, "Garth Brooks just this morning broke every Ticketmaster record." That's during the pandemic. He has broken Ticketmaster records. What you see then by that is that there are people who want to go out, who want to consume entertainment. But notice the entertainment they want to consume. They want to consume the entertainment that's actually going to entertain. They are tired of the same old drivel. People are tired of the same old MCU formulaic type movies, which of course nowadays, especially with films like Captain Marvel, you saw it a bit in Endgame as well. You especially saw it in films like Black Widow, are also now trying to preach to people in these different ways and have all these different political messagings behind them, whether it's in the film or in the cover-up of the film or the covering of the film itself, the promotion of the film itself. You're starting to see that people are just like they saw with the NBA when it got political, or any other sport when it got political. People said, okay, I'm going to turn you off. I'm going to go somewhere else. So it's not that there isn't this hunger out there. So I think that this is a great point to say, you can't really use the pandemic as an excuse as to why not just this film, but any film isn't doing well at the box office, because if you have people who are willing to go out and buy these live events and go and pack in these centers and lead to sold out shows, it doesn't make any sense then why you wouldn't have a similar mindset for the movie theaters, for films as well, unless there isn't as much passion, there isn't as much drive for people to want to go see them, because the content being put out there is not seen by people. And again, this is just based on the numbers that we're seeing. People, it seems, at the box office are showing that they don't have any real drive to see the films that are being put out there. That what's being put out there is not enough to make them want to go out to a theater. And as a wrestling fan and someone who's just gotten back into wrestling thanks to CM Punk, shout out to CM Punk for coming back to AEW, by the way, if you look to those shows, they're packed as well. They have pay-per-views that are packed with thousands upon thousands of people. They're giving a product that people like. They're giving a product that people want to enjoy because it's escapism. That's what it all comes down to. It's amazing that Hollywood has just forgotten this standard. People want to be able to escape into different worlds. They want to be able to enjoy new stories. They want to be able to enjoy new characters. They want to be able to enjoy well-done stories, well-crafted stories that are not just trying to go towards the lowest common denominator or push political agendas or try to go and pander to specific audience demographics. People are tired of that stuff. And obviously, I think the projections of Shang-Chi, and also the fact that people are going out to other events, is a great example. And he gives another one. Deadline reports Brooks sold over 50,000 tickets in less than 30 minutes for his upcoming concert at Rice Eccles Stadium in Salt Lake City, Utah. The concert took place in July. Again, people are obviously willing to pack areas. Now, one could argue saying, yes, but this is different because there's much more, many more movie theaters coming out with the film coming out at the same time. And when you count the number of tickets sold, you can break down how many people are actually going. And so you could say it's somewhat comparable. But at the end of the day, I think anyone can know and recognize that there was a time when, especially for an MCU film, it was seen as an event. It was similar to a major concert where you had to be there opening night to avoid spoilers. You had to be there and be a part of the crowd. You had to be a part of the experience. I remember going to see films like The Dark Knight in a crowded theater, and the reason why you went wasn't just because you were like, oh, I'm just going to go to a movie. You're like, no, I want to be a part of this moment. That's not happening anymore. It is still happening in the realm of music. It is still happening in the realm of even things like NASCAR. Not happening with Hollywood. And I think that we really do need to understand the reasons why that is the case. And it's really hard to not see that one of the main reasons is the content that's being put out there. As this goes on, Virginia Tech Athletics just reported that the Hokies opening game against North Carolina is in Blacksburg has been sold out. The home of the Hokies, Land Stadium, holds 66,000 people. As Fox Sports notes, Dover Motorsports reported that the recent NASCAR race at Nashville Superspeedway sold out all 38,000 seats. And there you go. Again, people are willing to go out. People are not, in many cases, afraid to be in a close quarter community. It's what is the content that's being offered? Are they being allowed to be entertained? Are they being given any type of entertainment? It's a great question. He goes on. On top of that, Black Widow opened just shy of 2 months ago in theaters, and it had an opening weekend of $80.3 million. That was good for the sixth worst opening weekend for Marvel Cinematic Universe. Still, it outperformed Ant-Man and the Wasp, Thor, Ant-Man, Captain America, First Avenger, and Incredible Hulk. However, it would end up as the fifth worst MCU film on domestic gross total. It only beat out Thor, Ant-Man, Captain America, and Incredible Hulk. If you factor in inflation, the only film it beat was The Incredible Hulk. Aside from the pandemic, Box Office Pro also points to the fact that Shang-Chi isn't a well-known character. They note Shang-Chi himself isn't generally known beyond the most die-hard fan circles. They also point to the fact that the film is releasing on Labor Day, a weekend where many people are accustomed to using a final opportunity for vacation or break before the full-fledged return to work and school in the fall. And that's always kind of this weird time period to point out, because you also then have a lot of people who are off, who do have the ability to go to a movie, to go enjoy a film. The issue is that there's nothing driving them to actually go out to an actual theater. And what's interesting about that previous point as well, about Shang-Chi not being a well-known character, guess what? Guardians of the Galaxy were not a well-known character either, and yet that was a smash hit success because it was a fun movie. And it drove people to the theater because of that, because it was still an MCU event film. That facade has been lost. Gone is the MCU facade. Gone is the MCU event film. And I think Endgame is really what burned a lot of people on that, because they gave just such crap storytelling in that movie and also really tried to push, in certain ways, different agenda points with it. And it goes on. Finally, they point major cities like New York City requiring vaccination passes that could potentially hinder some of the family audiences that would typically show up in Marvel films, given all ages appeal, specifically kids under 12 who are not yet eligible for the vaccines if regional governments don't allow for exemptions. So again, pointing out here the excuses that are being made, and yet what we see going around the country is that when it comes to content, when it comes to entertainment, people are willing to go out to see it if the entertainment is viewed by the consumer to be worth consuming. The issue, of course, is that you have tons of shills online trying to tell everyone, no, just consume. This has the best martial arts. Remember, John Campea said the best martial arts film that he has ever seen since The Raid. Again, guess he doesn't watch a whole lot of movies at this point, and again, kind of just shows once again just how much he is willing to shill for Disney, as he is in this video where everyone's getting their little fun packages of free stuff, which obviously has some impact on the way that you view the experience, because guess what? When people view and review movies, typically, it's not just based on the movie. Typically, it's also based on the experience that you have. If you go to see a movie with a bunch of friends, you're more likely to have a better experience overall. That's just kind of a common knowledge. But it does call into question these early positive reviews. Are these actual legitimate reviews, or are these rather just people saying, oh yeah, you know what, I had fun with the people around me, and so therefore, hey, I guess the movie must be fun too? Again, I think that's something at least worth considering. But again, a huge shout out to Bounding into Comics, and especially for John and Trent for pointing this stuff out, because I think it is important, because this is something that is not being talked about nearly as much. Because I can talk about the box office numbers and the projections, and obviously these are numbers that are going to get updated. But what's not being talked about is the fact that you can't use the pandemic as an excuse for low numbers when so many other industries are seeing booming ticket sales, sold out arenas, and people clamoring for more. And it all has to do with the type of entertainment that's being offered, and are you getting any type of escapist content or not? Anyway, those are my thoughts. What are your thoughts about this whole thing? Do you think that Shang-Chi will have the worst opening and the worst box office of any MCU film? I would say it's very much prepped in a lot of different ways for that to be the case. Let me know in the comment section below. If you like this video, smash that like button, light up that fire button. It really does mean a lot. Also, a shout out to Gorma Kyle79 for being a Patreon member. And I will be putting out an updated September Patreon video in the first couple of days of September. So, Gorma Kyle, again, thank you very much for your patience with that. But anyway, you guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my August Locals, Patreon, and Subscribe Star members. Starting off with my Locals crew: Cat's App, The Real It, D Sharp, Biffer the Hobbit, Robert Barnes, and Goblin Squatch. Thank you all very much for supporting me over on Locals. And now on to my Patreon members: Andrew Hoyle, Brian P., Christopher Bowman, Dion, Don Bruno de la Mancha, Father Christopher Miller, hail to you, Father. Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Harold Francis, Inflamed Wood, Jacob Juice, Jeffrey Toone, Jonathan Carney, Lance, Laura, the Modern Major General's Story, Mike Jackson, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mondo Spieler, Mr. Peabody, On to June, Orange Hat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Rosetta Allen, Teresa Martin, Theodore Benden, Tina Bojan, and Tina B, the Empress of the Universe. Thank you very much for supporting me over on Patreon. And lastly, to my Subscribe Star peeps: Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, John B, Perpetual Punster, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK Man. And a shout out to one new member, Hannibal Grimm. And a huge shout out to newest members, Brandon and Joe Horn. Thank you all very much for supporting me on Subscribestar, and to everyone for supporting me on these platforms. Also, a shout out to all of my YouTube members. You get shouted out at the end of every single live stream. And if you want to have your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and every video, please check out my Locals Patreon Subscribe Star. And you can go ahead and find those links in the top link of this description. You can find it's called the Willow link, and it'll have a list to literally all of the social media platforms and all of the different ways that you can support the channel. If you join at the $1 level, you can actually get your name shouted out at the end of every single video and live stream. $5 level gives you that, plus you get access to exclusive giveaways of 4K titles. Right now, I've got tons of 4K steelbooks to give away this month, including for Top Gun. I also have A Quiet Place Part 2. I have Snatch on 4K, the John Wick trilogy on 4K, and also I have a Sicario 4K disc as well, and a bunch of others that are going to be coming in this month too. So if you want to have access to any of those types of exclusive giveaways, join at the Army of Asgard level. At the $10 level, the Keeper of the Bifrost level, you get all of that, plus you get access to exclusive behind-the-scenes videos, including instant reactions when I go to see movies. I do quick little filmings of myself and talk about the films that I have seen and my instant reactions to that. You also get access to an exclusive podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger once or twice a month, and you get to also ask us any question that you want. We put a Q&A post up, and you get to ask us whatever it is that you want to ask. So again, if that sounds cool to you, Keeper of the Bifrost level. And lastly, there's the Chosen of Valhalla level, where you get all of that stuff, plus in your first month as a Chosen of Valhalla member, you get a free t-shirt, your choice, ship it anywhere in the world, and also you get to once a month be featured on the OMB Reviews channel, and you get to talk with me. We usually chill out for 3 to 4 hours, and I ask everyone what they've been watching, what they want to talk about, what they want to promote, and it's always a really good time. And so if that sounds interesting to you, please consider joining. That is going to be on Subscribestar and on Patreon only, as Locals is just the Keeper of the Bifrost level. But anyway, thank you all very much for your time, for your support, and for listening to this shout-out video. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.